Hi, welcome to Write More Late. My name is Sarah with the Midwest Writing Center, and this web series focus is on aspects of literature and education. Today, we're going to be talking about, I've titled this video Found in Translation. We're going to be talking with a couple of poet translators who are really great. They're both really talented, really fun people who we're all going to be very lucky to learn from today. Um, If you are new to the web series, half the time you will see me interview somebody who knows something or is doing something cool in the arts, and half the time I will give a tiny little writing lesson. Um, what I have for you today, we're going to go in alphabetical order, is a conversation between Kathleen Maris Paltrineri and Kelsi Vanada. Kathleen Maris Paltrineri is a poet and translator from Iowa. She's the recipient of a 2021-2022 I just like for some reason somehow almost got those years wrong while reading them. Uh, Fulbright Fellowship to Norway and a Lois Roth Endowment Award for Translation Research. Her translation of Norwegian poet Kristen Birgitz and When the Light Comes, It Will Be So Fantastic is available for pre-order. Hey, from Curbstone Press, an imprint of Northwestern University Press. This translation was supported by the Stanley Graduate Award for International Research, and excerpts have appeared in Guernica, Circumference Magazine, Brink, and Poetry in Action. Those are all like among my like goal my goal publications. For Kathleen's own poetry, she's received scholarships and residencies from USF Verftet. I'm guessing that's in Norway. Uh, Arctic Circle residency, Sewanee Writers Conference, and Gentle Artist residency. Paltrineri's poems have recently appeared in Bone Bouquet, Bennington Review, Calyx, and Jubilat. Also goals. Also goals. Um, five poetry light projections from her Archipelages. That's so cute. Series were, I love wordplay, were exhibited from 2023 to 2024 at the New Gallery Berlin in a Traces group show by artists, writers, and educated educators. Kelsi Vanada is a 2024 NEA Translation Fellow and holds an MFA in poetry from the Iowa Writers Workshop, in addition to an MFA in literary translation from the University of Iowa. She writes poems and translates from Spanish and collaboratively from Swedish. I'm excited to talk about collaborative translation. So excited. She cultivates a readership for poetry and translation by writing reviews and teaches occasional short-term classes and workshops. Since 2018, Kelsi has worked as the program director of the American Literary Translators Association, ALTA, in Tucson, Arizona. For Kelsi's listing in Poets and Writers Directory, I'll hand y'all links, and she's also in the Authors Guild. You'll get a link for that as well. Thank you so much for A, being here with me today, and B, being in conversation with one another. I think folks have no idea what they are in for, and I'm so pumped. Yeah, thanks for being.
Thanks so much for having us.
Yeah, I just like muted myself and then and then disappeared. So I wanna add, I met you, the two of you, in the same setting at the same time, and you were working together as a team. And it was like, to me on the outside, I was very much like, oh, these people were meant to be partners. Like this makes sense. You so then knowing I think Kelsi, you were a translation student at the time, and then Kathleen, you became a translation student after that. And it was just like I don't know, it seemed very much like puzzle pieces fitting together for me. So being able to hear you both talk about these shared passions is just I don't know. I really do. I'm not being like hyperbolic or anything when I say I think this is really going to be a gift for folks interested in poetry and translation and the art of translation and also me. Um, so my first question, I'm trying to do this in a specific order because I think the answer to the second question would be answered by the first question. I want to kind of go slow. So, how did each of you come to poetry? We'll go with Kathleen.
Um, wow, okay. Such a big open question.
Take us all the way back.
Yeah, I know. I was like, oh, that's further back then. Um,
Well, I think I
first
think
of,
it's important to the
yeah,
story
yeah.
of you as a artist.
Mm. Yeah, maybe first I'll just say that yeah, Kelsi and I worked together at the International Writing Program at the University of Iowa, and it was such a fun time. I mean, it's an incredible residency. Writers from all over the world come to Iowa City for 3 months, and they give readings and they visit classes, and it radically opened my honestly wildest dreams as to what poetry and literature could be. I was constantly introduced to new ways of thinking about language and new ways of thinking about writing, um, and it unfortunately has had all of its federal funding removed from the organization. So just to give a little plug, I guess, for the International Writing Program, they're seeking support, and there are ways to do that. And maybe at the end of the talk, we can share a resource for how to do that. But in terms of my own coming to poetry, oh gosh, there are so many different things that I think shaped me into becoming a writer, and a reader. But I think at the most basic level, I've always been fascinated by language and what it can do. And I started writing from a really young age, and went to like a like middle school writing workshop, and my sort of connection or deep participation in poetry has sort of ebbed and flowed at various points in my life, but it's been present from a really young age. And I think a lot of it has to do with curiosity, um, about human beings and the human psyche, and about relationships, to people, and to landscape and to nature, and especially to language.
That was beautiful. Kelsey, your turn.
Um, like Kathleen, I also was writing from a very young age, as far back as I can remember, really. But I was writing mostly short stories, even through high school. I think my high school had maybe one creative writing elective that I took. But it was really when I went to the University of Denver, and I had some really wonderful poetry professors, including Eleni Sikelianos, who became my mentor and whose work you should all look up if you don't know her. I just had these
Can you
incredible.
spell that for us?
Yes, Eleni, Eleni, and Sikelianos, Sikel. Oh my gosh, now I'm like having to write it as I say it.
I was going to say it's hard to spell things aloud.
It is hard to spell things aloud. Sikelianos. So I just had these incredible teachers who were wonderful poets themselves, and really showed me what poetry could be and do in a way that I had never encountered before. And so from then on, I was really writing. I was just writing poems, but I was doing it very much kind of on my own, and in kind of a vacuum. I think that maybe that part of me that was becoming a poet, like you said, Kathleen, was always very interested in language, in sound, and language play and rhyme. And I think that probably developed kind of alongside as I was learning Spanish in school, and then spent some time living in some Spanish-speaking countries. And so those were kind of both developing, but I didn't really, the literary translation piece didn't really come in for me until graduate school. So I was at the Iowa Writers Workshop, getting my MFA in poetry. And then the International Writing Program that Kathleen mentioned was right across the street from the Writers Workshop. So they offered a translation workshop where you could be paired with a visiting writer to translate some of their work. And so I was paired with this wonderful Venezuelan poet, Natasha Tiniakos. And so my first experience of translating was getting to sit right next to this poet and sort of ask her any questions that I wanted, and realize that my love of creative writing and writing poetry could go together with my love of a lot of Spanish language literature and my knowledge of Spanish. So yeah.
I obviously knew that the MFA in literary translation was going to come up. Did not include it in any of my questions. And I think that I've sat in on some workshops, both the IWP ones and the like the classroom ones with Aaron. So like I know how cool it is and how much it must be like really, really formative for an education for a translator. So I'm gonna have to remember to bring, I mean, I wrote it down. I'm gonna have to remember to bring that back up. You kind of, Kelsey, anyway, answered this already, but the next question, probably pretty obviously, is how did you come to translation? So that's for Kathleen, really.
Yeah, I just went for it.
Well, I thought that if I asked that question first, you would both be like, well, I'm a poet. So
Yeah, no, they're so interlinked, really. I grew up in Iowa. I grew up in Cedar Rapids. And my dad was in the military, and I lived with my mom, and my dad was like literally all over the world. And so really from like a very small age, I've kind of been in this position of like being between languages. And I think that was maybe in part, you know, a kind of seed or something that that led to my kind of curiosity about language and about culture. And I have on my dad's side Norwegian family, so also from a very young age, like maybe um since when I was in kindergarten or something, we were traveling to Norway and and meeting with family and like going around the country. And I, in terms of my language acquisition, I didn't grow up with Norwegian in my immediate family, but my grandmother, my dad's mom, you know, had kind of sort of cultural awareness about language. She never had the opportunity to learn it, and so she actually sent my sister and I to Skufjorn, which is a language learning camp for children. It's a part of the Concordia Language Villages near north of Bemidji, Minnesota. So my sister and I went to Norwegian camp. Um, and and so I think as I was you know, really diving into my own writing, I had the incredible experience of studying with Charles Simic, who is a translator, was a translator himself, and also just like this he just kind of held this like massive encyclopedia of world poetry in his mind at any given point. And so I think my curiosity about, oh, wow, I could actually do this thing called translation myself. And it had been some time between my language learning as a child and during my undergrad experience, I studied in Norway. And so I returned to the language and picked it back up and studied heavily. And then, yeah, as you mentioned before, after I worked at the International Writing Program, I joined the MFA in Literary Translation at Iowa, and it was such a incredible experience. Yeah, and I'm so honestly grateful for translation. I think it it gives you such an intimate view into someone else's words and someone else's thinking and someone else's emotional landscape and connection to the world, and that's such a gift.
oh yeah, after one day sitting in on that workshop, I was like, am I gonna be a translator? I don't speak another language. I survived being ill. No, sorry. I survived my partner being ill in France, so I felt really good about my ability to navigate the French language. You know, I had to go to a pharmacy and stuff. Um, but that's not quite speaking another language. But it is, yeah, it is such a God, I don't know, like a gold mine of knowledge or information or something. Uh, yeah,
And also just the closest kind of collaboration in a way. That's an element of translation that I really love and that has been important to me from the beginning. Probably stemming from that first translation experience where Natasha and I were really working together. And I think I only translated 2 of her poems in 3 months because it was just so new. And, the poems were complicated. And so it was this wonderful kind of puzzle and challenge to figure out how to create a version of them in English. But yeah, I mean, one of the most wonderful things about being in Iowa City is that you're surrounded by other writers, and there is also an MFA program in Spanish creative writing, which is one of very few in the country, I believe. And so I became good friends with a lot of the folks in that program and started translating them really early on, and we became friends with many of them, and now I'm translating their published work. So that's kind of been a thread for me that's been important. Like Kathleen talked about, this kind of intimate view or look into someone else's sounds and mind. That's something I love about translation and the relationships that I've been able to create through language.
I'd love to talk more about the literary translation program. I mean, as someone who is not a translator, um, I feel like it's a really unique environment and a really special way, important way of looking at translation. So if you guys wouldn't mind talking about that experience, either in the workshop setting or in the program at large.
I can say a few things about it. Yeah, truly an incredible program. I was able to kind of transfer some credits from the poetry MFA into my literary translation MFA, just because I was really already taking their classes because I was so fascinated with translating. I know the program has changed and grown even since I went through it. I graduated from the program in 2017. But there was obviously a workshop component, which is the main aspect of the MFA, which is a multilingual translation workshop, and that's pretty special. You have people translating from all different languages into English, and many folks for whom there was no one else in the room who could read or speak the language that they were translating from, and so you really learn how to ask each other good questions about why specific choices have been made in translation as you try to kind of help each other find the best possible version of that work. There was also a sort of more theoretical component, which I loved and found very fascinating, where we read sort of some of the basics of translation theory and then put those into practice through activities or assignments that Aaron always called translating under the influence. So we would translate under the influence of a certain thinker's approach to translation, which was quite amazing. So yeah, I'll let Kathleen say a little bit more about it, but I also did want to say, for you, Sarah, for anybody out there who, even if you have a few words in another language, or if you have a dictionary, I think that you can start. That's one of the great things about translation. There's no, you don't have to have a degree, and there's no certification requirement. Anyone can get started, and it can actually be a great way to work on your language skills, and to grow in your knowledge of the language that you're translating from, and just a close and intimate experience with language that I think can really enhance anybody's writing process.
Yeah, that was, I would, second everything Kelsi said. The being in a multilingual translation experience is so incredible because you're sitting in a classroom where people are translating from Arabic, from Japanese, from German, from Norwegian, from Spanish, and you're collectively looking at a text in English, and it's such a intimate, it's such a way of reifying how language also in English operates. Like I remember sometimes some of my colleagues would immediately toss out questions and also about the source language. So, like one of the first questions was like, how does I don't know, how do like possessives work in Norwegian, or you'll get questions like, really on the nitty-gritty of language, like how are these suffixes operating that like can kind of create rhythm or sonic echoes, or so it really gets you to think so deeply into the language and how it operates. Like Norwegian, in comparison to English, for example, has three additional letters in the alphabet, and they're all vowels. So how do you work with all of this additional like assonance and alliteration that happens, and how do you manage to like translate that sound into English? So they're really like extraordinarily lively discussions. And but yeah, I also really loved the scholarly aspect, and the research aspect. I think I learned a lot about researching and researching the author that I'm translating. And in addition to translating a work for your thesis, you also write a critical introduction. And so essentially, situating the author that you're translating into, a literary lineage, perhaps, or yeah, thinking about where their work fits into the literary culture in which you're translating out of, and how that can inform your translation. So I remember the first semester we had a translation theory class, and I think I went to Arona and Jan, and I was like, "Oh, that's great. Are we gonna have a theory class every semester?" And um, I was a little bit maybe outnumbered in my desire for that. So, but you can also do independent studies. So then I was like, okay, let's dive into like feminist translation theory, and it's really super flexible. I'll also say Iowa doesn't have a Scandinavian studies program. So the Norwegian language was not available for me to study, nor the literature. And so independent studies were a way to like kind of connect. And then I also was able to invite a Scandinavian studies professor from another university onto my thesis committee. And then through the CLCL, I was able to get funding to like continue studying Norwegian. So they offer resources for students when languages aren't available.
What is the CLCL?
Oh, shoot. I knew this was going to come and I should know.
You don't have to know the letters. Can you describe what it is?
Yes, it's like Kelsi knows, you work there, right? It's the Language and Culture Center
Yeah,
at Iowa.
yeah, which I also benefited greatly from. I was able to have a Swedish tutor for a while. It's kind of an amazing program. If a language is not available at the university, then you can be paired with someone to do like video tutoring. Yes.
Yeah, it's the Center for Language and Culture Learning. Sorry, sometimes acronyms I just like.
I know.
Yeah. Oh no, for sure, for sure. And there are so
Wonderful
many
center in
acronyms.
Iowa.
I didn't mean to interrupt you. I just wanted to get clarity on that.
Oh yeah, no, that was it. I was wrapping up.
Okay. So I'm just gonna hold my face, I guess. The that program. Oh, I wanted to rewind. I took a note. Um, Writing under the influence or translating under the influence is such a cool idea, and I think you can really translate that into haha, um, other art forms. Like we talk a lot about like imitation when you're learning a craft or a skill. Um, but with theory, this is my understanding, with theory in mind rather than just craft doing that. Or maybe I don't understand quite what translating under the influence is. Um, I mean, I imagine that's quite the brain workout. Can you maybe give me an example of how it looked when you were working on, I'll say, a poem with that in mind?
Um, yeah, I think I can think of a couple of examples. It was often sort of taking an idea to the extremes to play it out in your translation as a process, as a practice. So something like, way back in the history of translation theory, we talk about Saint Jerome, who was a Bible translator, and he's kind of famous for this phrase that you might have heard called translating by the spirit versus the letter of the text. So, very basically, do you have to translate in a more sort of literal way, or can you, as a translator, translate in the spirit, meaning something like you're trying to mimic the same effect of what the text would be like for the original reader, but you might transpose some things into the culture of the reader, for example. So then maybe we would translate a poem, and you would just try to translate one by the letter of what you would consider a very literal translation, and one by the spirit, trying to capture the kind of overall tone and sound of the work. So maybe that's one example. I can remember one poem that I translated where I think we were working with the idea of thick translation, which is the idea where you include a lot of context around the work, a lot, maybe footnotes, or like a kind of a paratext where you give an introduction. So I remember one poem I translated where I used in Microsoft Word a drop-down feature. So for certain words, I would, the reader of my translation could use the drop-down and see 4 or 5 different sort of translations of the same word, just to show kind of, look, I'm trying to give you everything I can that's around this text, to help you as the reader kind of have as much recourse and resources as possible. I don't know, Kathleen, do you remember any other examples?
These are great examples, and you have a great memory. But yeah, so yeah, these are really wonderful examples. So kind of taking a particular theorist and applying it to your own poem and your own approach to translating the poem. So yeah, I think like another one that I engaged with, well, one of the ones that was really fun is Nabokov is like famous for including so many footnotes. So we were all like translating, whatever it was, whether it be poetry or prose, and then suddenly there's like this giant list of footnotes, like marking different aspects of the text, or different like justifications for certain ways of translating. But yeah, it became something that really was informative in terms of, okay, how are we attempting to understand, like, not only our intention towards the translation, but also, how are we reading this text under which lenses? Yeah, thinking about Vermeer's like Skopos theory, and thinking about like, the overall like purpose of the translation, and how that might come forth. And so it really requires you to sit down and think, okay, what exactly are my goals of this translation? Oh yes, Skopos is Skopos. So yeah, thinking about the ethos of the translation, the spirit of the text, and what your own that as Kelsi was saying, that you're not essentially like creating some sort of like phrasal or word for word translation, but rather, as she said, like the spirit of the text and how are you setting out and approaching that. Um, so yeah, maybe just a couple of little examples there.
So what's really cool about this, first, you said there was only one theory class, and I cannot, I mean, I know that's like a semester, but I cannot fathom how that would be a one-time thing because you've already just taken a lot of notes already. Some I take notes so that I can come back to things, but also so that I can look things up or put them in the video description. I can't imagine theory being just a single class. That's wild. Um,
Mhm. We
it's
did definitely like return to theorists or read theorists and the other classes that we took that were not workshops. So theory was always present. It was just like one kind of dedicated class at the in the very first semester of the program.
it would
Yeah,
have
and
to be right. Uh,
it's kind of interesting because there's plenty of translators I know who feel like they don't have much use for theory, and I can
Mhm.
understand that. Sometimes these texts are really dense to read, and they don't always feel like immediately applicable when you've got a novel to translate from one language into another. But I think, like Kathleen mentioned, they're kind of lenses for seeing what we do, and I think that everybody's operating under a theoretical approach, whether they might name it or not. And those are like the many times the ways in which translation is political as well. Are you thinking through the kind of cultural questions, how you're going to translate cultural elements from one language to another? Those all come into play, whether no matter how we've kind of received that theory more formally or just kind of through reading or in the air.
I'm really glad that you said that because, I mean, it seems really obvious, but I forgot, in this process, like how much is evident through the language we use about, who we are, who the speaker is, and where they come from. And it's often really clear to you reading in your native language. You're like, oh, this person has the dialect of this region, and from that I know that they have this background or whatever. Or the slang they use or the abbreviations they use or the amount of formality, whatever.
Mhm.
Um, but certainly when you're doing that in translation, you may not have the context right off the bat to know that background because it isn't necessarily a culture you're immersed in. That's really cool. Um, Also, the way that you've been describing theory and the practical application of it, of course, feels very much like gosh, I'm trying really hard not to say the coach's tree, but like a coaching tree. It's like a family tree of the
Oh,
craft and of the
Mhm.
theory, right? If you and you can very well, probably you have your own influences in mind and there's some theorist out there who who believes what you do and has written it all down, right? Um, but you don't necessarily it's all intertextual, right? It's all interacting with each other through through the literature and through the translation. So it sounds like when you describe reading the theory and then being in workshop, like you're very much learning your own lineage or contributing to a lineage of translation. And I don't know, that just seems really special given that translation is really a gift, right? I didn't have access to this thing before, and now I do. Even if it's gone through a second lens, it's it's accessible to me now where it wasn't before. And maybe I'm missing some element because I don't know how that wordplay would have worked out before or what political implications there are um, given the time and place or whatever. Um, but it is like such a huge service to anyone who is interested in something outside of their immediate scope. So that is a little rant that you gave me.
Good rant.
Thanks. I
Yeah,
try.
we all need more of that kind of reaching across boundaries and borders and looking outside of our own selves and our own context, right?
And that's why that's why I'm interested in learning languages and in translation is because I know that I don't know how much is out there that I don't have access to. And even if, you don't have the nuance of a native speaker, you get just so much more access to the world that way. I think that's very cool and exciting. Um, so, how my next two questions are also like really interrelated, so the order of them might matter. Um, I'd like both of you, all these questions are for both of you. What are some surprises that you gleaned from learning translation as an art rather than a one-to-one? Sorry, I realized I'm going to rewind. Please don't answer that yet. I will ask it again. You talked about I don't remember the word you used, but like a one-to-one translation versus a spirit of the piece translation. Are there, I would say outside of like, I guess legal documents and stuff exist, but is there a time when you feel like the really precise, like literal translation word for word is going to be the right way to go? I imagine it's usually a combination of the two that turns out to be the move.
Sure,
Do you
I
want to
can
go
jump
first?
in. Yeah, I think so. The poet that I am translating, Kristen Berget, maybe I'll even just like show you a page so you can kind of see the form in which she's working in primarily. Um, so she has these incredible poems that like go across, this is in Norwegian, sort of go across the landscape of the page. And I don't know if you can tell, but there is quite a lot of like caesura.
Mm.
So these spaces in between the phrases that she's using is what we might call caesura, and it has a connection to many literary histories, including like the Old Norse poetry um, and so she's operating in this kind of like phrasal mode, you could say, by the way that she is scoring her page. And so so I often translated, thinking about the phrase. Um, but in terms of sound, I think thinking very much about the individual words and also even the syllable became so important to my process. I was thinking a great deal about rhythm. Her poetry is so sonically gorgeous to me, and it has such wonderful rhythms. And so really breaking it down, I mean, I got to the point where I was even like counting syllables and like, how can I translate this with rhythms that have echoes to the Norwegian, because I love how the Norwegian sounds. So yeah, getting down to even a more granular level than the word, like to the syllable, I think is so useful and instructive of how poetry sounds, how it sounds in the mouth, how it feels in the body.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's beautiful. Thanks for that example. The translation that I have worked on most recently is this book, which is called in English Day's Fortune, and it's by Carlo Acevedo, who was one of my friends in the Spanish creative writing MFA. We've been friends for almost a decade now, and I've been translating him for that long. This book is just out, and so just a reminder that writing and translating is a long game. Sometimes, yeah, it's just a process that you may be with for many years before it might be in book form, or there are also many ways to share translated work. But Carlo writes these very condensed short poems. Actually, the middle section of this book is haiku. So they are this big, three lines, and he actually did write the haiku in the 575 syllable count. The way that you count syllables in Spanish language poetry is a little bit different than the way we do it in English. I didn't feel that it was the right choice to try to force these poems into a 575 count in English. But what I did do was try to pay attention to the overall kind of length of the lines. So here's one of the English poems. You can still see that the second line is longer. But like Kathleen said, I was paying more attention to sound in this instance versus the precise syllables. But sort of to answer your question, Sarah, this isn't the kind of book where I could, if translating the spirit of the text meant, describing something that he had shared, that might not be the right choice for this book if it got real long, because these poems are so condensed and short, and the form is important. So in that sense, this is a poem where oftentimes I was looking for just one word to fit one word in Carlo's poem, or at least to kind of, find ways to mimic a lot of the beautiful vowel sounds that are coming through. So yeah, another example.
No, that's awesome. And I would never have been able to come up with that to ask about it. So really happy that happened. But what's really cool, and this is an awesome segue, I'm very excited that y'all did this for me, with the use of the word caesura. Thank you so much, Kathleen, for this segue, but for both of you, because your answers were just so exactly perfect. It seems like, because I know you're both poets in your own right, it seems like knowing as much as you know about form and creative writing itself is really, really helpful for translation. So I think it's very clear that your own writing influences how you go about translating, but how has the craft, the art of translation informed your own writing? Did I say that backwards? Writing clearly informs your translation. How does translation inform your writing?
Yeah, this is such a great question. It's funny in a way because I feel like one of the reasons why I'm so drawn to Kristenberger's poetry is like for her, finding like different rhythms outside of my own kind of, I don't know, sonic mind or whatever that comes to me first. And so being inside someone else's like rhythms and like pattern making is so fascinating and so wonderful. And then I mentioned this one time to my spouse, and he was like, "Oh, that's interesting because I feel like your poetry also has a certain kind of cadence in a way that's similar to Kristen Berget." And so then I was a little bit nervous about how I was translating her rhythms. So, but I think so in this collection that I've translated, I mean, she has themes that are very much like ecological, pertaining to like ecological and linguistic loss, like memory and deep time. There's also a kind of narrative of motherhood. And so I think some of these like themes of her work are things that I have now taken up much more of an interest in. So far, I don't think my own poetry necessarily addresses them, but they've they've given me a way to kind of study and think about how we connect with nature in ways that that I was, my attention was just simply directed in other toward other themes or other subjects.
The way any writing might.
Mm.
Mm. I mean, similarly, I love that translating allows me to sort of try on a lot of different kinds of writing that I might not naturally produce myself. And so, yeah, I've worked with a number of poets at this point and have had the chance to kind of try on some different styles that way. Everything from Carlo's very short, tight lines, which I tend toward a little bit myself, to the Spanish poet Berta Garcia Fayet, who writes these incredibly long form poems. So that kind of stretches me to try on new things. In my first book, which also just came out, there are actually some moments where, yeah, I can show you, it's exciting. It's called Optional Saint with Bench Editions. And, oh, look, yay, oh my gosh, thanks friends. They both have my book too.
I wanted us to, I had it on speaker view, so I wanted us to all be able to do that at the same time.
Oh yeah.
I'm on cameras.
Thanks everybody. But there are some, this book does a lot of quoting from a lot of different things I was reading or overheard conversations, sort of idiomatic phrases that come up in our everyday language. And there are definitely a couple of moments in here where I quote a little phrase from my own translation of one of the poets I've worked with. So sometimes the influence is very direct because those words are so internalized because I've spent so much time translating and carefully choosing those words that they become kind of part of my own language, and they have come out in the poems themselves. Thematically, I don't know. It's interesting what you said, Kathleen, about sort of being immersed in and maybe attracted to some of the thematic material or the content of Kristen's poems. I don't know if that's necessarily the case for me. I think maybe form sort of sticks with me more, but it's a great. That would be a great prompt for me to kind of practice trying on the style or writing with the concerns of one of my poets I've translated.
I'm just so excited. This is, it's something I'm super interested in and kind of know nothing about. So it's just like candy for me. And we've sort of talked about this throughout. I'm totally forgot to watch the time, which I tend to do when I do this. We've sort of talked about this throughout, but is there anything that comes to mind, any surprises along the way with your either education or practice as a translator, or being both a translator and a writer? I can keep going.
No, it's a good question. I think it's like just surprises all the way down, surprises all along the way. Like I mentioned, I didn't really even consider until grad school that translating literature was something that I could do. So that's maybe the biggest surprise of all. I mean, I know that I read some translated literature in my high school English classes, for example, but we certainly never talked about them as translations. So to come to that was the first big surprise. But then, yeah, being surprised by each new relationship with each of the writers that I've translated. I never expected to form such beautiful friendships with people really all over the world. Some of whom I knew them as friends first, and others of whom I was translating them first, and then we became friends through the process. Yeah, and then I mean, I always wanted to be a writer. It was a surprise that translating sort of ended up coming first for me. And I've translated a number of books before publishing my own book. But I feel really just lucky and grateful that it happened the way it did.
Yeah, I would agree. I think there's like surprises all along the way. I think one of the things that I have been a little like taken by is like how many layers it's possible to um to translate. I mean, I think I was surprised by how many like comprehensive revisions that I did of this translation and, revising for thematic concerns, of which there are many, like
Mm.
addressing like faith, addressing the role of mythology, addressing like um yeah, concepts of like critiques of like industrial agriculture and impacts of like fertilizer on soil levels, like
Wow.
even coming from Iowa and having literally worked on farms as a detasseler and a tractor driver in my high school days, there was so much that I learned about soil during the process of
Wow.
this translation that I never knew before. I never thought that like, that I would learn by becoming a translator and just yeah, like all of the layers, but it really became this almost obsession with me, which I was also a little bit surprised by, where yeah, I would translate, I would revise an entire draft for like theme. I would revise an entire draft and literally only focus on the verbs. This is like an eco-poetic collection of poetry where the author is certainly encouraging readers to like develop closer relationships to essentially like decenter humans from the position we often put ourselves in, to consider our relationship with all beings, all living entities. And so then suddenly, it was like verbs became like neon signs for me, and like noticing that that in one poem she connects the word, the verb for like the experience of breast milk, like coming, coming through and like feeding a baby, using that same verb for the force of the sea, and noticing things
Mm.
like that across the poems. And just being so surprised, by that. And yeah, I think one could really spend an enormous amount of time simply with one collection of poetry and always find something new and always find something to be surprised about. Um, yeah, so it's a fun experience. And then I think Kelsey mentioned early in the talk, like this kind of problem solving, like it becomes in a way really quite thrilling.
Yeah, finding that right solution feels so good.
Yeah.
Oh man, I think also you like this is a particularly nerdy thrill, but having that, I don't know, freedom to get really nitty-gritty with it sounds
Mm.
luxurious. Um, okay, right. I'm being mindful of time. If y'all want to do this again, I have more I want to hear from you. Um, we wanted to, I'd say this like we had a committee meeting. Talk about some favorite resources that folks might be able to visit to learn more about. We'll say the various arts of the written word. Kathleen, we're going to you first.
Okay, yeah. I think I opened so many links in the course of this conversation. I need to go to my other one. But yeah, I'll just put it in the chat if that's
Yeah,
okay.
I'll share the link.
Okay. Yeah, I wanted to share about, for those folks who are in the Midwest or have access to the University of Iowa library, to mention the Ruth and Marvin Sackner Archive of Concrete and Visual Poetry. The University of Iowa acquired this archive in 2019, and it holds, I think, the world's largest collection of concrete and visual poetry. So just to kind of give a mini definition, concrete poetry, dealing very much with poetry that is visual in a textual way, and visual poetry that could include collage. It could be a painting. It could be like a neon sign. It could be something written on a trucker hat. Like it's very widely interpreted, and they just have the most stunning collection. I think there's something like 70,000 items in the archive, and you can set up appointments with the librarian to view the archive. And they also have many
You
broad
must set an appointment.
Yes, yeah. They're rare materials and have to be handled very carefully, and in specific ways that the librarian would help you with. But there are many pieces that are written in languages that aren't English. So it's also an incredible opportunity for a new sort of way of translation. Oh, and then I wanted to also share just very briefly, maybe, I don't know, Kelsey, did you have something? And then I'll come back to the IWP.
I was ready for IWP too. That's funny.
Oh, great. Oh,
Let
okay,
me know
yeah,
if
go
you've got
ahead.
something. I think Alta is probably a pretty badass resource.
Yeah, you can go to literarytranslators.org for Alta's website. There are resources on the website, but you can also see the kind of events that we put on for translators. On May 27th, there is a day of virtual panels that anyone can tune into from across the world. We call that day Write the World, and so you can learn about that. It might be kind of a neat way to just tune in and hear some translators talk about some of the things that are important to them. But I would also encourage everyone to check out two other sites that publish literature and translation and are really good resources. Those are the Words Without Borders website. They have a literary journal, and also some educational resources, and that the same really for the Center for the Art of Translation, or CAT. The Center for the Art of Translation publishes books. They have a journal, and they have, again, a lot of educational resources, including there's any of you out there who are instructors of young people. They have a wonderful curriculum called Poetry Inside Out, where it's designed for young people to get a chance to kind of practice translating a poem from a different language into English. I mean, my other best resources, honestly, personally, are my Spanish-speaking friends, of whom I ask many questions as I am going through the process of translation. And then, online dictionaries. I use many different ones to look things up. It's hard sometimes to imagine being a translator before the internet age, when I can just look up anything and learn so much. We joke as translators that we often find ourselves looking things up that we never would have expected to be learning about. So yeah, even like Google Images is useful, so that you can make sure that, if you have an object or something in mind that you need to find the right word for, that you're seeing it correctly. That's often kind of the key for me, is to make sure I can see what I'm reading and then find a way to say it in my translation. Kathleen, did you want to talk about the IWP?
Yeah.
I will link to their fundraiser, and I will link to their YouTube channel when I put this up.
Right.
Just so that's said.
Yeah, I also wanted to share, um, I just linked to Norla, which is Norwegian Literature Abroad, for those budding translators of Norwegian literature. They have a tremendous amount of resources and support for new translators. And in fact, the part of the production costs of, I believe it's the production costs or some of the fees associated with publishing. And when the light comes, it'll be so fantastic with Northwestern University Press has been in support with of Norla, Norwegian Literature Abroad. And so they're so fantastic about sharing new works. They're always like sending out emails about new books that are being published in Norway and connecting people with authors, and they're such wonderful human beings as well. And then yeah, so you were gonna share so this is just the basic opening link to the International Writing Program, but one of the things that is so fantastic that Natasha Duravichova created on the website is you can search authors by country and also by year who have participated in the IWP. So, and there are also writing samples online. So it's a great way to get to know authors going back decades. I mean, this is an organization that's existed for, I don't know, 60-ish years, 50,
I
60
know I was
years.
there for the 60th anniversary, so we're past that.
Okay. Yeah. So really writers from around the world, you can get a taste for their work and then go and find other examples of their writing as well.
There I shared. I wanted to do the you did the residence by location. Why can't I find it? Is it here?
Yes.
Country, yeah. Do we have a country in mind?
Um,
I know, that was terrible.
Let's find Natasha Tiniakos from
yeah.
Venezuela.
Oh, session.
Hopefully you can
Annie,
see
there we
it.
go. Mm. I know him. I know her. I know her. Are these okay? They're alphabetical. I was like, what's happening? This is not by year.
There she is.
Here we go. So this was the first person you got to work with translation. Is
Yes.
that right? Oops. Well, did not mean to zoom in. I clearly have no control. Okay, now we've looked at that. Is there anything else y'all want to add? It's okay if not.
I was just gonna say, if I can, maybe I'll also share
Please.
Northwestern's website, and they made this really cute postcard of the collection that's coming out in July in just a couple of
Yay.
months.
That's
Um,
beautiful. I'm a
Yes,
big
everyone
postcard
order
fan.
Kathleen's book.
so excited.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Yeah, I will share all of these. Um, Real quick, I will first thank you so much for being here. I know we're not totally done yet, but I want to say thank you. I'm I'm having the best time.
Thank
Uh,
you, Sarah, and for the great questions too.
Yeah, this has
Thanks.
been so wonderful. Thank you very much.
I'm going to give some quick updates on the Writing Center. I'm going to just go 1 week into the future because we've got too much going on to do much more than that. Um, This Thursday, April 24th, we have a Spectra reading event. It's the last one of the season, the 24-25 season. That is totally free at Roz Talks in downtown Rock Island. The visiting writers are MC Highland and Elizabeth Clark Wessel. They will open at 6 p.m. with a totally free writing class for anyone. Then at 7 o'clock we've got an open mic, and 8 o'clock they do their headline reading. Saturday the 26th we have an online writing class with Tatiana Schlody-Bonet called Writing Fear, but the focus of this class is on really fleshing out your protagonist so that whatever or whoever their antagonist is, it really makes sense and it's really believable. And it's well, she's a horror writer, so scary is an option, but I'm going to be taking the class and I don't scare flies and they're pretty easy to scare. Um, no, wow. Okay, that's kind of it. We've got Writers Studio the first and third Saturday of the month. One of those is online, one is in person here at the Writing Center. That is a totally free workshop critique group for anyone. Our goal is to give you the feedback that you are looking for, not tell you our taste, so that you know you're not editing for me, you're editing for the work that you want to produce. We are currently accepting through May 1st applications to the Great River Writers Retreat. That is a fully funded writers retreat in rural Rock Island County. You get just a week, all your food and shelter and research, hopefully, needs met. We'll also give you a headline reading and promote your work a bit. We're accepting applications for the Young Emerging Writers Internship, which is a paid summer internship for um, writers age 15 to 19. We learn how to write and workshop and read and design a publication, and you get published and you get paid and you learn to perform your writing. It is the coolest thing in the whole world. Birdies for Charity is going on right now. So if you donate to us through Birdies for Charity, and you can become a member that way, any donation of $30 or more either gets a membership or a renewed membership. We get a 5% bonus on all donations. So that is a really, really, really helpful way to give to us if we're on your mind. I'm gonna end there. And go back to Kelsi, who's got our prompt for today. We give yourself as much time as you can. If you only have 5 minutes, cool, give yourself 5 minutes, but do your best to follow this prompt. Kelsi, please take it away.
So this prompt is, I call it English to English translation, and it is a fairly simple way for anyone to get a sense for the things that translators of poetry have to think about. So what you want to do is choose a poem in English, maybe start with a shorter one, and then what you're going to do is you're going to write that poem again in a different English. So you can't use any of the same words. Pick something else to say what the poem says in its original. And you can set up your own rules. Maybe you can still use articles, which are very hard to choose another option for. But essentially try to write it again without using the same words. It's a great exercise to kind of get the creative juices flowing for your own writing, but it also really helps you think like a poetry translator as you look at kind of the form of the poem and how you might try to recreate the form. If there is, rhyme or some kind of sound play in the original, how are you going to do that in your English translation? And it just will hopefully kind of give you a little look into what it is that we do, even if you don't have another language.
I think that is so cool. Yeah, thank you again. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for watching, friends out there. Like I said, there'll be lots of goodies in the description of this video. Please write more light into your life.